Hello and welcome to the Rewind, where we dive into the making and legacy of various films from cult classics to award-winning masterpieces. Today's episode will focus on the film career of the one and only Eddie Murphy, the stand-up comedian and Saturday Night Live star who will go on to become one of the biggest movie stars in the world thanks to his performances in the likes of Beverly Hills Cop, Shrek, Dreamgirls, and so many more. Joining me today to talk all things Eddie Murphy is Associate Professor Bruce Isaacs. He's a senior lecturer in film studies at the University of Sydney and co-host of the Film versus Film podcast, the link for which you will find in the show notes below. Bruce, man, I just want to say thank you so very much for joining me today, and thank you for, talking all things Eddie with me today.
Yeah, total pleasure. Eddie Murphy's very special to me. So I saw that the doco was coming out, so I've also been excited.
So when it comes to Eddie Murphy, you just said he's very special to you.
Mm.
Like myself, I grew up watching Eddie Murphy. I
Yep.
mean, when it comes to kind of like what they might say like a generational star for certain, people, I was born in 81.
Yep.
That was around the time, yeah, Eddie's career really took off. So I grew up watching these movies all throughout his career. It's kind of like he's like one of our kind of stars. And I think two of the first things I saw, which is one thing I shouldn't have seen, which was Raw, which was the
Oh, yeah, sure.
stand-up comedy show, which supposedly made like a ton of on the in the box office. I think it made $50 million and won him a Grammy and such. It was a huge kind of thing. I watched that when I was very young, too young to have watched it, and I think a lot of jokes went over my head. And the other thing that I saw that really made me fall in love with Eddie Murphy was Coming to America.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was a TV edit. So we had the VHS. It was a TV version that was shown on Channel 9 or something. So a lot of swear words and stuff were taken out, but the humor was still there. The crux of the story was still there. And I was just impressed and immersed in how this one guy can play so many different characters, and you have the Rick Baker makeup and everything else. It's just so fantastic how he did it. And ever since then, I've been a fan of his through like even now and again, I'll try to watch a movie, which wasn't the best movie, things like Showtime
Yeah.
or Pluto Nash or things like that. Um, they weren't the best, but I'll watch them anyway because Eddie's my guy, and like I'm
Yeah.
sure it's like that for everyone else. What about yourself, Bruce? What was your first kind of experiences with Eddie
I
Murphy?
actually have a profound first experience with Eddie Murphy. So I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa.
Hmm.
And that was a really different kind of film cultural world to certainly, what I'd say of Australia or if the US. Somehow, my uncle, this is around maybe 85, got access to, I should say, in South Africa, we didn't have VHS, we had Beta. Beta was the
Hmm.
thing that was kind of taking over. And we had a video player. And my uncle had a copy of Beverly Hills Cop, like a pirated copy somehow. And I just remember I was about, say, 7 when I'm watching this. And I remember my mum absolutely loving this movie
Hmm.
for the reason that I think a lot of stuff we saw in South Africa had been sort of censored by the government. This was not censored. And so, if you go back to the moment of the 80s, there's just the sheer level of kind of profanity and zaniness of the dialogue and so on. So I just remember my mum crying with laughter. I just remember this so vividly. So that was a movie that I have a twin brother. That was a movie I grew up watching over. I must have seen that movie 50 times, right? So Beverly Hills Cop was really massive for me. And then that for my whole family and for a certain moment of my film viewing catapulted me into everything else Eddie Murphy. So I remember the next film I saw, maybe like a little after that, but I was a bit young to kind of get the gist of it was Trading Places.
Hmm.
That was a big thing. Trading Places today is still one of my favorites, but all the things you mentioned, right? So Coming to America, oh my God, I can quote half that movie, right?
Yeah, I know,
There's
right? Yeah.
certain- I think, I think a generation today would find it hard to understand how big Eddie Murphy was. So I was like you when I was very young. My parents are kind of pretty open. I could watch anything I wanted. So I saw Raw and Delirious, right? And again, all the jokes would have gone over my head as well. And in fact, look, the truth is, if we think about kind of culture of the world right now, those films, they're going to be tough for people to watch now because of
Right.
just the nature of the humor. But to kind of say what that moment was like with Eddie Murphy, this was way before the concept that's now kind of passé, which is the whole Netflix special, like a Chris Rock special kind of thing. Eddie Murphy was just a guy that would sell out an entire auditorium. And then they made these things, and they, as you said, they were huge box office smashes. He'd done SNL. I've seen a lot of his skits on SNL. And so he was, for you, same as for me, a kind of accompaniment to my growing up with the movies.
Saturday Night Live, like for me, wasn't something I ever watched as a kid. I don't think we got it here in Australia
Yeah,
around that time. Maybe when cable, for us I remember cable only came to Australia like maybe in 95 or
yeah,
96.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And from that, DVD and or Saturday Night Live stuff on DVD. So I never really watched it, but I know like in the States, this was like his big breakthrough kind of thing. He was on there between 1980 and 1984. Interestingly, that's when Lorne Michaels, who was like the guy,
Yeah,
that's when he wasn't part of
yeah,
the Saturday Night
right.
Live thing. He left at that time. So Eddie Murphy kept that thing afloat. Gumby, Buckwheat, Mr.
Yes.
Robertson, kind of like the
Really,
parody on that kind of stuff.
these
He
characters.
he was the man. And so that, of course, transitioned over to movies because it's really interesting in that time. For me, I don't know, like if you look at it in a historical aspect, if it's something that you see as well. For myself, when it comes to the American comedy, I think the 1980s was kind of like the peak of what the
Yeah,
American
yeah, yeah.
comedy, because I think a lot of the people that came from it, especially Saturday Night Live,
Yep,
if you look at the names before Eddie Murphy, it was Chevy Chase.
yep.
He had kind of like Caddyshack. You had Bill
Yeah,
Murray with
yeah,
Stripes. You had Dan Aykroyd and John
yeah.
Belushi with Blues Brothers. And then after that comes Eddie Murphy. But he was just like a totally different thing because these movies were different to what everyone else is doing. That first movie, his debut film, and I think in the history of debut films, 48 Hours,
I know, it's
for that
incredible.
to be a debut performance is incredible. Playing Reggie Hammond in the film, he's out for like 48 hours because he has to help this undercover cop played by Nick Nolte, find like a bad guy and there's drugs involved, everything else. Walter Hill directs it.
Yeah,
Supposedly went through a ton of rewrites. Stephen DeSouza, he's the one who ultimately did the big rewrite on it. Kind of, kind of invented the buddy comedy in many ways
yes.
that movie
Well, a
did.
lot of people say definitely 48 Hours. It's that kind of buddy comedy that would really come to dominate in the 80s, you
Yeah,
know. And also the other thing we haven't even mentioned, which I think is huge, is that Eddie Murphy's on SNL. But SNL, it's a huge show, but it's still like a skit show, right? And so it,
yeah,
it occupies a kind of niche thing in American culture. Somehow, someone gets the idea, this guy's obviously incredibly talented, quite individual. Let's put him in a movie. And as you say, for those of the listeners who have not seen 48 Hours, go and watch that movie. Very tight action film. And it introduces, as I was saying before, this idea of like a racial difference between the two
mm,
characters. So Eddie Murphy represented this kind of smart aleck black guy knows the streets. Nick Nolte's this white guy that knows the streets. They're not going to get on, but of course they're going to somehow find this rapport and way of getting the job done. And they're just absolutely wonderful. I don't know if you remember, Matt, but that amazing scene where Eddie Murphy says to Nick Nolte, look, give me your badge. I'll show you how to do this. And they go into this redneck bar.
yeah.
And he just has this diatribe about race and about country bumpkins. And I reckon that alone was going to ensure this guy had a career in the movies because he's so magnetic. And look, Eddie Murphy, all these guys on SNL are so much improv type people, right? I would love to see what was the script and then what did Eddie do when he went into the place?
Yeah.
How much was he just riffing with what was going on? Because there's an immediacy and spontaneity in that I think we see. So, obviously the big one is Beverly Hills Cop, but you're already seeing in 48 hours there's something magical about this guy.
Um, I love Marlon Brando stories because he's just such an elusive, mysterious kind
Yes,
of guy to me and
yes.
so eccentric. One story I heard that Eddie Murphy told, I forgot if it was Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon, one of those talk shows. He talked about how Marlon Brando actually called him
Oh
and
wow.
said how much he loved 48 Hours and actually quoted that whole monologue scene you were talking about to him over the phone, like every single part of it, which kind of blew Eddie Murphy's mind because it's like this
Oh,
is
can
like
you
Marlon Brando,
imagine this? I mean,
Yeah.
what was Eddie Murphy when he did 48? He must have been like 20
early 20s.
old,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, he was, this is the other thing. You don't really see full-scale movie stars break out like that unless they're the next big kind of the Timothy Chalamet stuff. But even there, they're a bit older, right? Eddie Murphy was a very young man when he became a movie star, early 20s. And I can only imagine what it must be like for a young black guy in his early 20s to have Marlon Brando, maybe the most revered movie star of all time, quote back your scene that you
Yeah.
just did in the movie. I mean, that must have been pretty spectacular.
It would, and it just again goes back to how much I love Brando stories because they're just so random like that, you know. And there's a whole
Yeah,
bunch of them like that. You mentioned before Trading Places. He plays Billy Ray Valentine in that one. He joins up with another SNL star in Dan Aykroyd.
yeah.
First time he works with John Landis in that movie as well. You also have Jamie Lee Curtis. It's a real kind of like it's a movie that's really interesting because it's many things. It's of course kind of like this fish out of water story. It's a social commentary on wealth in America at the time. It's a Christmas movie in a lot of respects as well. And on top of it all, you got Eddie Murphy in the film. And I think a lot of people were surprised with the performance there because you saw kind of like the streetwise Eddie Murphy. We know the sketch show Eddie Murphy, but in this movie, in that he's put in different positions, there's like different things that he does in the film that I think a lot of critics at the time really enjoyed. Dan, and again, it was another hit for the show, and Aykroyd and Murphy actually do great work working together on this stuff. I think it's one of his better movies as well.
So as you know, like as I was saying, Trading Places was a really important movie for me. I think it's one of the best movies of that moment in the 80s when you were starting to see the film as social commentary
Hmm.
engage with things like class and race and wealth and so on. And the fact that it was a John Landis movie, John Landis had come off a bunch of things. I mean, he was a big, big filmmaker at this point.
Yeah.
It's unbelievably well written and plotted. So again, it's this high point of, I guess, a certain moment in 80s kind of comedy buddy films where there's a kind of caper aspect to it. Like these guys have to overturn the people on the inside in some way. And there's this convoluted thing they're going to do. It involves the stock market. So at the same time that, someone like Oliver Stone's making Wall Street, which is the whole greed is good critique of capitalism, you got another movie which is all about the way the wealthy take advantage of the poor. And
Hmm.
for that to, again, a very young Eddie Murphy, he's kind of perceived then as being a rising star, but he's making movies that have got a bit of substance to them. And I think that early phase of his career, he did do a lot of things that were some of the best films of the 80s. He wasn't just taking anything. I think he was quite judicious in thinking, okay, it's worthwhile doing this. And then when they actively try to make him a star with Beverly Hills Cop, he doesn't lose who Eddie Murphy was. I mean,
Yeah.
Beverly Hills Cop, I think originally they were not thinking Eddie Murphy. I can't remember who they were going to do it as a straight kind of, um, you know, action film, crime film. But Eddie Murphy makes that into a subgenre that had really never existed before. It's. I think Beverly Hills Cop is unlike any movie that had ever been made in Hollywood.
The interesting thing about that film, and you touched on it just then, this wasn't a movie that was, originally for Eddie Murphy. There were
No,
so many people were involved. I know Mickey Rourke
yeah, they
was
had
attached
so
to it
many
for
people going for it. Yeah,
so many. Pacino, Harrison Ford. The one person who was on there the longest and was actually close to making it was Sylvester Stallone.
I heard that as well, actually, because he had so many hits with those Rambo films, right? So he was
Mm,
at that moment, Stallone could have made anything and made $100 million. So the studios were all trying to get these people one after the other. So the idea that you put Eddie Murphy in it, that really only happens because of 48 hours, right?
that's
There's this
right.
perception that what if we could tap into this thing that this guy has? But I also think that's a moment where studios were interesting, where I think there was a sense that they could be a little bit adventurous. Because if you think of it, like Eddie Murphy is never going to be able to play that role straight. Axel
No,
Foley is going to be this wise talking street smart guy. He's never going to play it like a Mickey Rourke would have done it, right? So I like that he clearly is being Eddie Murphy playing Axel Foley. And the studios just, well, again, nobody predicted what that movie would do. I mean, it was such a phenomenon. Nobody could have ever projected that. But it was a phenomenon because of Eddie Murphy, not because it's a really well-written crime action film. It's, I think, because of Eddie Murphy.
But the interesting thing about this film, and it's a Jerry Bruckheimer, Don Simpson film as well.
Yeah.
So they're like the big producers
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
of outside of Joel Silver, I'd say like in the 80s, they were like the big
Yeah.
guys, right? When they came to Stallone with it, Stallone was is notorious, and maybe to a certain extent still is. I'm not sure if it's a case anymore, but he was notorious for really grabbing the material and kind of
Yes.
reframing it to suit his own kind of like what he wants to do. So the movie that he rewrote ended up being Cobra, which came out like in
Hmm.
1986. He actually changed the
Oh,
name of the
that's right,
character
of
from
course. I
Axel Foley
remember
to
it.
yeah, Cobra
Yeah.
Reddy. And when Bruckheimer and Simpson had enough of like this kind of like this nonsense, they're like, we don't want this. They parted ways. They bring Eddie Murphy in, and then
Yeah.
they kind of retooled stuff so it
Oh, Eddie
works.
Murphy,
And
yeah.
then and then you have Axel Foley born. And not only do you have his biggest role to date, not only do you have the biggest box office role that he had today, and he made a ton, but he has become a franchise star now because there's like
Yes.
three more that will come out over the
Exactly.
next years as well.
And I think that's again, that's that size of what Beverly Hills Cop was. So
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I totally forgot about that. That Stallone ended up making Cobra,
Mm.
which gives you a sense of how fluid Hollywood is. Like I think a lot of people, for people like you and I, we kind of are really into this sort of thing. But a lot of people think of Hollywood as an incredibly well-oiled, precisely operating machine. It's for the most part, it's not really like that at all. So a guy like Stallone is on the original whatever it was, Beverly Hills Cop. But I mean, sometimes he does it brilliantly. So, what he did with First Blood was
Yeah.
turned into an absolute masterpiece, and a lot of that was him. And I think people do credit him for that. But in another way, he's obviously going to intervene. They decide no, we'll part ways. He makes Cobra, which I think if people have seen that would give them a sense of his vision for Beverly Hills Cop.
Yeah.
A completely different film, almost like a kind of nearer to a kind of action vigilante type movie that was pretty big, right, in the early 80s. Whereas when Beverly Hills Cop comes on, it's SNL coming together with this burgeoning buddy cop thing. And so Beverly Hills Cop just happens to be also one of the funniest films of that
Yeah.
era. Whereas Stallone is not really going to be able to do that kind of fast talking humor, but he's also a lovable rogue, right? So Eddie Murphy, you just love the guy in the film. Um, and Stallone is not going to be able to do that. And so
Yeah.
so this idea of the fluidity of Hollywood, a film was one thing. Someone leaves, it becomes overnight something completely different. And just to say to people listening that I could name 20 stories like that where a film just became something overnight because somebody decided to do something else.
Hi guys, Matt here from Matt's Movie Reviews, letting you know that the Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel has launched channel membership. This provides exclusive videos and other cool stuff as well for all channel members. It's under one tier, one price, and with that one price you get exclusive reviews. For example, I'll be going through the American Film Institute's top 100 movies. So every week I'll do a new review based on that movie list. You can get exclusive reviews based on your requests. Request a movie review and I will review it for you. You'll also get exclusive content for behind the scenes stuff as well. You also get exclusive interviews that I haven't posted yet as part of my podcast, like older interviews with Academy Award winners and other great filmmakers and actors as well, and a bunch of other cool stuff as well. I hope you can all join up, be part of this great experience I have an offer for you. Support indie content creators, support a movie critic like myself who is trying to make it through the content creator space. Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel memberships. Please join and get some great exclusive content. The cool thing about Beverly Hills Cop as well is that with Axel Foley, the character he plays, being an undercover, police officer, that he's kind of like a chameleon in the film in that he has to put on different guises. He doesn't do like he would do later in his career and do the whole makeup thing. He kind of
Yes.
just on the spot kind of transform. He'll like be in a scenario and he'll be like, oh, I need to get from A to B. How do I do
Yeah.
that? Okay, I'm going to pretend to be this. I'm
Yeah.
going to do that and what have you. So he does different voices, he does different mannerisms and such. And so, but then at the same time, he's becoming an action hero as well. He's out there with Judge Reinhold and other people in the cast, and they're shooting at the bad guys, and there's fist fights. He's getting thrown through
Mm.
glass windows and such, and
Yeah.
getting arrested for it, which is one of the big jokes in the movie.
Yes.
And he's doing all this stuff, and it's at that point where you're just like, we all knew this guy was great, but this is the time now. Like he can bring all this stuff together. He can lead the film. He can lead a franchise. He can lead it to 200. I think it was at the time it was like $240 million at the
Oh
box
yeah,
office,
it's
which
crazy what people just
I
got did.
think if you adjust it for inflation for like an R-rated film, it's still like in the top like three or four for
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And it's just a remarkable to watch, and I think it really just kind of goes to show this guy isn't just a comedian for say
Yeah.
he's a movie star, and this
And,
was
and
the
I think
movie star
that's the big
performance.
transformation that takes place with Bill Lewis. So he was still perceived to be he was a superstar with SNL. He was known to be this very brilliant kind of improvisatory comedian, but then he becomes the movie star. And
Yeah,
I think, if we were to say to each other, all right, who are the movie stars of the 80s? Not just good actors, who are the ones that actually, in kind of studio language, who could open a movie? And by that I just mean, if I put this guy's name above or woman's name above the title, I can guarantee we get back our money just by putting them
mm,
in the movie. Eddie Murphy's one of maybe 4 or 5 people in
yeah,
that decade where I'd say, okay, you can bank on Eddie Murphy. If you're going to make another film, put him, it doesn't matter how crap the movie is, you're still going to make the money back. And I think that was the emergence of a kind of movie star we had not really seen. I mean, Eddie Murphy is nearer, he makes the action star into a semi-comedian. So the scene where he arrives in Beverly Hills, goes into the hotel, and he sort of says, "I'm here, I'm with Rolling Stone magazine. I'm going to do an
yeah,
interview."
yeah.
And and
Michael
he
Jackson,
starts,
yeah.
and he turns it into this whole race riff, right?
Yeah.
Now that's the stuff he'd been doing on SNL. So it's as if he's importing this into the movie, and it just works because the genre is making space for this kind of thing, and I think Beverly Hills Cop can do that because 48 Hours proves it works. That
Yeah.
you could send Eddie into the bar and he will just do this nutty skit for 5 minutes, and it's going to be the funniest, most engaging thing you've seen. And Beverly Hills Cop is just full of that, right? I mean, and there are a couple of Beverly Hills Cop characters that are really, I think, so clearly adapted from his personas in SNL. So he was kind of drawing on who he was in SNL to become this. But yeah, your point about the movie star thing is huge. He's an action star. Um, the one thing Eddie Murphy, and this is something I've always been fascinated in his career. It was, in, I think it's been impossible for him to break into the kind of romantic lead
Hmm.
in an industry dominated by what I would call kind of white romance narratives.
Yeah.
So, so even like what makes Beverly Hills Cop weird is that there's no romance. There's a kind
Yeah.
of, he's got an old friend. They could have a romance, not permitted. There's this actual whole subtext online, and there's a strong perception amongst a number of major critics that Axel Foley is gay. I don't know if you've ever read that, Matt.
From what I understand of it, I think it was Wesley Morris who
So
really kind
he's
of
one of
pushed
the
that
famous people that's put
advocates of
that
it.
out there. Yeah.
And from what I understand, his position is that the relationship between the reason why Axel Foley, for people that haven't seen the movie, goes from Detroit to Los Angeles is
Mm,
to kind of avenge the death of his friend who gets
mm.
killed off in the first like 10-20 minutes.
Yes.
And so the insinuation is that them two weren't just close friends, but they were like romantic, they were
Yes.
partners. And then there's other things in the thing, like the whole banana in the tailpipe, that kind of joke and all that. So that stuff kind of used as well to kind of like I don't know if it's true or not, but it is interesting to think that I think with the exception with the third movie, I think there's not been for Axel Foley, there is no romantic interest in
Yes.
any of,
And in
of
the
the
third
movies.
movie, it doesn't, yeah, because in the second movie, there's no romance. And
Yeah.
there's this whole subtext in action movies of the 80s, especially some of the best movies like Lethal Weapon and so on. There's a weird kind of the romance, for want of a better word, is actually between the two men. That's the
Yeah.
chemistry, right? And I think, but Beverly Hills Cop makes it a bit more explicit in there's just never a romance with a woman, right? Until it gets completely forced in number three. But if you look at, the Lethal Weapon movies, Lethal Weapon opens with Riggs depressed because his wife has died.
Yeah.
So immediately there is this, okay, this guy is not only the action star, he's the romantic leading man, and that's going to evolve in this. So there's but Beverly Hills Cop for me has always been fascinating because it's the weird one. Eddie Murphy became a superstar outside of his ability to play the leading man. And even Tom Cruise, who I think is one of the least likely romantic leading men, like he always seems so uncomfortable in that role. But the studios even made him into a leading man. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So you can't do it with anyone, but they never did it with Eddie Murphy. And I think that's in many ways a kind of racial division in Hollywood which is less so now, which is great. But back in the 80s, that was a big deal.
Yeah. It's very much true. I remember I think last week I was talking to someone about the movie Commando. I don't know if you've seen
Yes.
Commando, the Schwarzenegger film,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that had Ray Don Chong and Schwarzenegger. And
Hmm.
supposedly in the initial script there was supposed to be like a romance, like a love scene between the
Yes.
two.
No, I know, but yeah.
Um, and they took it out, and there was a lot of reasons why it just wouldn't work, this or that. But the screenwriter Steven D'Souza, who also wrote 48 Hours, he said that a big reason why they didn't do it is because they're afraid that the southern states won't go for an interracial
Isn't it?
romance on
Hmm.
screen. So that thing was there in the 80s. Yeah,
And I mean, that's such a great point because D'Souza, if I'm right, was heavily involved in Die Hard, right?
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, so, and then, if you think about John McClane as a person who's going to inherit some of the stuff that Eddie Murphy does, not the wisecracking stuff, but, a kind of more, a non-traditional action hero.
like
And
the everyday man kind of thing, right?
exactly, everyday man. And the most important thing for the everyday man is married. He's
Yeah,
got a wife. He's got to protect his wife. He's got to save his wife. Whereas Eddie kind of never went that way until he started in that moment in the late 80s, early 90s, where, I mean, I don't know what they call it. They kind of call it, I think, the African American movie kind of thing, but the whole cast is African.
oh, like
Harlem Night,
Boomerang would be that. Yeah,
Boomerang, Harlem
Boomerang. Yeah,
Nights, where it was kind of tapping into a certain cultural moment that people like Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor and stuff felt was just never represented in Hollywood, so they
yeah,
would do it. And
yeah,
those movies did okay. I mean, I think Boomerang did okay. Harlem Nights tanked. That was
yeah.
his first massive failure.
Yeah,
And
I mean, there was Best Defense, but that wasn't really his movie, was it? I mean,
yeah,
that
that
was
was more. That was
they
more
brought
like
him
a
in. Yeah,
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 exactly. And that was more like a kind of semi SNL like attempt
yeah.
to. I think what did it have like Bill Murray was Bill Murray or John Candy?
I
One of
think it
one of those.
was. I think it might have been Dan Aykroyd,
Okay. Oh,
and
I
was
think
it?
you're right. I think it's Dan Aykroyd, and
I think it's
also
Dan
Dudley
Aykroyd,
Moore was in it.
Dudley Moore. That's the one
Yeah.
I'm thinking of. Yeah,
You had
yeah,
these people that were kind of a certain genre. Eddie comes in and it doesn't work at all. But in the meantime, he's become this massive movie star. I mean, the
yeah,
talk was that everybody was trying to cast Eddie Murphy in everything
yeah,
after Beverly Hills Cop. Like I think they even had a shot at Eddie Murphy for Die Hard.
yeah.
For that.
Ghostbusters was a popular one as well.
He was going to play
Yeah,
the Ernie Hudson character,
that's
and
right. Yeah,
when they couldn't get him, they wrote Ernie Hudson's character so much out of the script because they
yeah.
figured he's not famous. Nobody knows who this guy is. But Eddie Murphy was going to be that guy.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's some of the things we've been touching on in regards to the romantic lead, in regards to having like the kind of like very much an African American kind of like on-screen experience. I think a lot of that kind of comes to the fore in Coming to America.
yeah,
That's what it seems to me too. And the other interesting thing about Coming to America as well is that it begins that Eddie Murphy as multiple roles in
yep.
the film. And like I said, when I first watched that movie and you watch the credits at the end and it says Eddie Murphy, Eddie Murphy, Eddie Murphy, Arsenio Hall, Eddie Murphy, Arsenio. It's like, holy, like how many people
I
is he
know.
playing in this? And I was like, he even plays the Jewish man as well in the barbershop. I had no
The
idea. It's like
barbershop sequences are just they're miracles of improvisation and performance.
fantastic stuff. And also, one thing we should mention as well, ever quotable Eddie Murphy as well.
Oh
Eddie
yeah.
Murphy movies are, I think, they're the most quotable movies. Like everything from what we're talking about, barbershop stuff to like the Axel Foley stuff to the Hercules stuff in Nutty Professor. There's so much. There's a whole range of stuff, which
Yes.
again it comes back to the movie stuff thing because it's like, having a great pop song that's stuck in your head forever.
Yeah.
The best ones from like your Michael Jacksons or whatever, they're going to be with you forever. They're legacy making. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes how a person delivers lines or creates improvisations or stuff like that is same. And that's something that Eddie Murphy does, but he does it in so many guises. That's what makes it
Yeah.
so incredible. And coming to America and Nutty Professor, Life, all these movies, there's one guy that's kind of attached to all of this, Rick Baker. He was
Yes.
the special effects makeup guy. He did American Werewolf in London, which in my opinion was the kind of like is still the best creature makeup kind of thing I've seen with the transformation of the werewolf and all that. He's done a ton of stuff. But the stuff he does with Eddie Murphy, I think is just so fantastic because not only does he change him physically, but Eddie Murphy does a whole just brings these characters to life. Even someone like the guy from the sexual chocolate guy.
Oh,
I forgot what his name was.
Randy Watson.
Randy, thank you. Like
Yes.
that as well. Like so many people just even still that whole thing is just still
I
amazing. It's
mean,
like
the
five
Randy
minutes.
Watson, I implore everybody to pause now and go to YouTube and watch Randy Watson doing
Yes.
The Greatest Level by Whitney Houston. And the amount, I can't tell you, Matt, what Randy Watson as a character meant to me growing up. Like we used to just enact that stuff. We would like do
Yeah.
the greatest love of all kind of
Mm,
thing. And
yeah.
so the fact that the thing that so the makeup is astonishing, right? I
Yeah.
mean, because it's a kind of realism to where you believe, like you said, when I saw Coming to America, I didn't know Eddie was all those people in the barber shop,
Mm,
aside from the one old guy that Arsenio is playing.
mhm.
But the makeup is amazing. What I always thought was the virtuosity of Eddie Murphy was he was the guy that would be imagining the visions of these characters. So he'd have to construct these personas. So he's going to play, the owner of the barber shop, who's this kind of fast-talking guy, just wants to talk about, who was going to win, Joe Louis or Muhammad Ali kind of thing. And so he's coming up with this stuff, right?
Mhm.
And then he's got to perform it. So I there's a wonderful interview I saw with Eddie Murphy. This was a few years after. I know we're going to come to Dreamgirls later, but a few years after Dreamgirls, and someone said to him, people said that you were really cheated for the Oscar
Yeah.
because there's this one moment where you realize your own failure in the film as the producer, and people say for that moment you should have won the Oscar. And Eddie Murphy said something like, "For that one moment, I had to play six different characters around a dinner table in Nutty Professor.
Yeah.
Give me an Oscar for that, not for the Dreamgirls moment." And I think people don't realize. One of my very good friends is a guy that is on a friend on the podcast that we run, a guy called Craig Anderson. He's a comedian, right? That he's trained in that. And I have the utmost respect for what it takes to create personas that are comedic, that are different, that create a kind of energy together. So again, whether it's Nutty Professor or it's Coming to America, the fact that Eddie's able to do this, there's a really amazing artistic talent in that. And I think sometimes maybe he made a few decisions in doing, certainly Nutty Professor, I think, made a ton of money, but people started to question his seriousness, I think, as a
Yeah.
kind of as an actor, which is obviously absurd because Hollywood doesn't take comedy seriously. But what it shows is just the sheer level of talent that Eddie Murphy had.
It sure does. I mean, again, just going back to what you just said there about him playing six different roles and not getting any type of acclaim
Yeah.
for it, like
Yes.
the critical kind of like awards bodies kind of acclaim. For
Mm.
me, they are some of the best performances. In you're not even just comedy performances. All acting is about trying to bring to life these characters and try to get
Yeah.
some type of reaction from it. And I think some of the hardest things you could do is try to make someone laugh. Yeah, like
Oh
honestly.
yeah, and I think the timing. I mean, a lot of people don't realize. I mean, that's not just comedy. It's just that's the idea of performance is it's so rhythm based and so beat based that great comedians, I think like great musicians play interestingly around time. And I think when you watch someone like Eddie Murphy or someone like Steve Martin's amazing at this as well,
Mm,
they're just able to do something that you don't expect but they control the timing of it. So let's say the punchline should be there. They just hold it for a split second, and that's the gag. That makes it work. And people like Eddie Murphy were just, incredible at that. And the fact that they were constructing this themselves. I mean, the fact that he's performing this multi-character um, encounter with, the family in The Nutty Professor. Another one that I just thought of, I don't know if we're going to mention later, but Donkey in Shrek.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, Donkey steals the whole movie.
he
With
does.
first, within the first minute of Donkey appearing, you don't want to listen to Shrek anymore. I now want to listen to Eddie Murphy, who's created this amazing persona for this animal.
Between the coming to America and kind of like the family entertainer, kind of like of what Eddie Murphy would be with with Shrek and Dr. Dolittle and stuff,
Yeah.
is a series of bad choices when it
Yes.
comes to movies. Robert De Niro, I think, famously said once, the talent is in the choices, and that's why he had such a good streak going for a little while there as well before he chose not so well later on. And Eddie Murphy definitely had some duds for a long time, especially like in the 90s.
Yes.
And there were moments when he tried to revive the stuff in the 80s. So he'll do a sequel to 48 Hours, didn't do well. He'll
Didn't
do a
work. Yeah.
sequel to Beverly Hills Cop 3, didn't work. And then, like we mentioned before, Harlem Nights, didn't work. Vampire in Brooklyn, he's back with Rick Baker doing stuff. Wes Craven directs it, doesn't work.
Yeah.
Metro, Holy Man, like all these movies that just go kind of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting in that I can't think of any other actor who had same number of duds like
Yes.
he had, and sometimes like something like Adventures of Pluto Nash, like that was like quite a hefty price tag on
Yeah.
that movie, and it
Yeah.
made hardly anything. That was a huge kind of like thing, but at the same time, he's still so revered and so talented, and still he's Eddie Murphy. He's one of
Yeah.
a kind. You can't replace that. That even though he would go through these long hauls sometimes of just no one watching his films because of the quality or what have you, even though you kind of know this in the back of your mind, you still think to yourself, but he's still the guy, same
Eddie
guy who
Murphy.
did Beverly Hills Cop. He's still the
Yeah.
same guy who did Come to America, and you want to watch his stuff again and again. I think that comes back to a certain, by that time he's established a certain legacy, a
Mm.
certain reputation that even though he's done bad stuff, it's worth checking out his new movie anyway because if he hits, there's nothing else
Such a
like
huge
him.
hit. I think
Yeah.
that's so true. I think also he encapsulates a certain kind of movie star of the 80s that maybe become, for example, the buddy cop movie loses some of the legs it had in the 80s. In the 90s, there are interesting things happening, but the world is changing dramatically. And that whole genre of the buddy cop movie, you're never again going to make a lethal weapon in the
Mm.
mid 1990s. It's just that moment has passed. So what Eddie Murphy became, especially the success of Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2, the huge success of Coming to America, I think he tries to redo certain things, but the moment isn't there anymore. And so he has to then, I feel Eddie Murphy, of all the major stars, has almost had to reinvent himself because he represented something that was so much of a time. He does the Nutty Professor stuff. And I like your approach to this day. It's almost like it's another wave of films he's making, where it's the multiple persona, it's kind of skit based, even Coming to America, right, which has got the barbershop scenes or him playing various characters. There are a whole bunch of set pieces that are just very funny. And
Mm.
there's a Coming to America always reminds me a bit of Trading Places as well. It has such a similar feel because of this the sort of urban setting. Um, but I do think that as time goes on, people are trying to fit him in somewhere, like the studios. He's trying to figure out what he is, um, and it never quite gets to that same space. He has massive hits. Shrek is huge, but Shrek wouldn't have been as good, but would have still been huge, right?
Right.
'Cause, it was always going to be a huge vehicle. It had been produced to be that way. Um, I think what's most interesting to me is when he does start to do straighter roles, and you discover, oh my God, this guy's actually an amazing dramatic actor as well. You
Yeah.
know, he could have done. many other things. He'd been kind of pigeonholed for a while. He made some great things, became a superstar. Um, and then I think occasionally you see him in a moment and you think, okay, wow, this guy, he's a star. Like, and you're right, he's still Eddie Murphy. How many people are like a brand in themselves? Eddie Murphy.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. Um, the interesting thing about that brand is that, like we were saying before, we grow up watching him.
Yeah.
We get older, we become the older generation. Maybe some of us had kids by the time the 2000s come along and stuff like that,
Yes.
maybe some people were like that. And then your kids start watching him and he
Yes.
becomes their favorite guy with Donkey, with Doctor Dolittle, with all
Yeah.
these selection of movies that start coming out, Haunted Mansion. There's a whole bunch of these films come out where he's like targeting a younger demographic,
Yeah.
and he's using that. And maybe, and I'm sure it's because he's become. I'm sure he's done interviews where he's talked about he's become a father himself. He wants
Yeah.
to have his kids watch his stuff and all that, and that kind of the stuff that he can do with the mimicry and everything else lends itself well to
Yes.
that kind of stuff, which I thought is great as well. Like you said before with Shrek, I think like Mike Myers, of course, is like the title character there, and of course a former another Saturday Night Live guy, and they join up together. But Donkey is the one with the best everything, best lines, the delivery, everything else. I think it is a fantastic thing. And if you tell any kid like in that generation of kids,
Yes.
who's your favorite character, I guarantee a 9 out of 10 are going to go for Donkey because he's just so
Oh,
funny and just so
completely.
wacky.
And what they don't realize is, especially for young people, Donkey is just, it's like taking Eddie Murphy back to the 80s and going,
Yeah.
hey, just go crazy on like, make Donkey whoever you want to be. And so Donkey, he's so lovable, but he's an absolute smart aleck, fast talking guy that Eddie was when he walked into the hillbilly place, the bar in 48. He's the same guy, right?
Yeah.
And I just think that I do think Donkey. I just remember he got massive acclaim for voicing Donkey, right?
Yeah.
Because it was so distinctive. And I mean, who would have imagined that it's Pixar, right? It was Shrek.
No, it was
Oh,
DreamWorks.
DreamWorks, of course, yeah. But
Yeah.
who would have imagined in a DreamWorks animation that you would get Eddie Murphy to voice Donkey, which immediately racializes that character? Like it's
Hmm.
important. And so he brings into it this whole cultural baggage, this whole way of speaking, a certain tone of voice, the references. And so I loved that when I first saw it. I just thought, gee, who came up with this idea to put Eddie Murphy as Donkey?
Yeah.
That'd be like casting some wisecracking person in Frozen, like
Hmm.
as the lead, because Donkey was one of the leads of it. So it's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. You were talking before about the he's trying to do the serious roles. I think he's always trying to get away from the kind of like comedy stuff. That 90s run we're talking about, he tries to do horror with Vampire Brooklyn didn't work, and he tries to become like a straight on action star with Metro, that didn't
Yes.
work and all that.
Just not look at all, yeah.
Um, and a lot of times it's just sometimes you just have that role for you. And I think Dreamgirls was definitely that kind of role in that movie. He plays James Thunder early in that, very much a riff on what he was doing with some of this stuff with the James Brown impersonation
Yeah,
he
yeah,
does.
yeah.
And it is a good singer. Like people forget, like he was a pop star for a moment there in the 80s with Party All the Time and such.
That's
And
right, of
he's
course.
he's won he's been nominated for Grammys and won Grammys for some of the like reggae inspired stuff that he does like in his side kind of gig stuff as well. Um, and so he can bring that kind of stuff, and of course it's dynamic and he's everything else, but he doesn't get the Oscar. And I
And I think
think
that's a big moment in his career.
big moment because I think everyone was kind of like anticipating for it to
Yeah.
happen, and I
I,
think a lot
I
of people were
remember it being
willing it to
kind of,
happen too.
it was like in the bag.
Yeah,
I was so ecstatic because obviously, like we've been talking, I've so loved Eddie Murphy my whole life, right? So yeah, I remember talking to my brother about this, thinking, can you believe it? Eddie Murphy's going to win an Oscar this year. How
yeah,
that's going to be like he's going to be front and center because I don't know if a lot of people know this, but if you win an Oscar in Hollywood, the story goes, your phone runs off the hook from there because the sheer visibility of being an Oscar winner means that anytime a movie now comes out, it'll actually say, and Oscar winner, Eddie Murphy. So there's another way of marketing you. So the talk was he had it. He was unbackable. Now, I don't know if there's any truth to this, but it's about Oscars run in February. I think it's our summer, their Christmas period. Just before that, he releases, I think it's Norbit,
Norbert, yeah,
and that I think does okay box office wise, not great, but just gets lampooned, not
yeah,
only by the critical establishment, but by the kind of social establishment. Like this is completely inappropriate, Eddie. What were you thinking? This is disgusting and ethically questionable. And in the meantime, he's on unbackable odds to win the Oscar. And then he loses the Oscar and it goes to Alan Arkin, who's like pretty good in Little Miss Sunshine, even
yeah,
though it's a film I don't really love. But that was, I think that was a moment for Eddie Murphy. If he wins that Oscar, maybe it's a sliding doors moment, and maybe he gets his Travolta moment from Pulp Fiction, and something else kind of happens that just rejuvenates this part of his career. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen. And I always think that was a sad moment for Hollywood because I think it was clear he deserved to win it for for Dreamgirls, not only because it was an amazing performance, but because he was Eddie Murphy, you
yeah,
know, and it would have also validated the fact that we're giving it to him for a serious role, but we're acknowledging that he's an amazing actor in all these
yeah.
other things he's done, but they don't give it to him. And I think then on, he doesn't do much of interest, like not a huge amount of interest after that.
A lot of stuff that he's been doing lately was kind of like a lot of it is straight to streaming. I think with
Yeah,
Prime, he's done a bunch of stuff. Netflix has done stuff. There were some things like Tower Heist that made some money because that was with Ben
that's right. I
Stiller and
remember seeing that at the
bunch of
movies,
guys.
and yeah, yeah, I
Yeah, it was
remember.
kind of like again street smart kind of character and such.
Yes,
One movie that he did was for Netflix that I loved, and I really hoped that he was going to get an Oscar nomination for it because just going back on the Oscar thing, the other reason why a lot of us were willing and just really wanted him to win that Oscar because we know that it's rare for him to get nomination because the movies he doesn't get looked at
no.
through at the awards bodies. It's kind of like the same thing kind of happened to me years after when Stallone got nominated for supporting actor for Creed when he did Rocky Balboa
Oh
again,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
he lost as well. They went with
That's right.
Mark
Because the talk
Rylance.
was he was gonna get it, right? And Mark Rylance
Exactly.
for
And
the
but I was thinking back to Eddie Murphy losing for Dreamgirls. I said, I bet you they're gonna do a Dreamgirls tour. I bet you're gonna give it to some established actor for the serious movie or whatever. And
yeah,
sure enough, Mark Rylance won it for Bridge of Spies, I think the
yes,
Spielberg film. But Dolomite is My Name, that where he played Rudy Ray Moore
yes, yes, yes.
for Netflix. I love that film. I love that performance because it's
I thought it
again
was great as well. Yeah,
he's doing a number one. He's doing a biopic, and he never. I don't think he's ever did a biopic before.
yeah,
I'm just looking over his thing. I don't think he's ever done a biopic or played like a real life person. I
yeah.
can't see that here. I think it's the first time does that, number one. Number two, he's playing to his strengths in the comedy spot, but also there's moments in that film that's like really serious drama.
Yes.
Because the actor of Rudy Ray Moore, like he had a very traumatic kind of upbringing and such, and so
Yeah.
they kind of play into that stuff. And I absolutely love that film. He doesn't get nominated for anything, which, by this time, I don't give a shit about the Oscars and stuff because
Yeah.
they're so kind of
Also,
just, yeah, everything in.
time-wise, there was that bad moment where the Oscars were deliberately turning on Netflix.
Right.
Like everyone, or like Spielberg was saying, nah, if it's Netflix, I don't want it nominated for Oscars. So there was this whole movement to stop. Obviously that's now they were so wrong,
Mm,
because now we've obviously gone. We're not Netflix is one of the big studios. So I think what happened there was because the talk was Dolomite was really good.
yeah.
It was Eddie Murphy's best performance in a very, very long time. And the
Yeah.
talk was he would be nominated. And then again, I was surprised where they just turned off that whole movie. But they especially turned off Eddie Murphy. And again, that was really unfortunate because for a moment there was talk, okay, he'd be back into the spotlight, and then it just doesn't happen. What do you think
Go
of
ahead.
the Axel F film, The
I liked Axel F, but I
Yeah.
was really disappointed that it didn't play in theaters, in
In
cinemas.
theaters, yeah. I wasn't a big fan. I just felt it's difficult, like coming to America,
Yeah, that one's terrible. Yeah.
I thought that was awful. I thought actually the first half I thought was really strong, and then I thought it kind of went off the rails a bit. But this idea of trying to reinvent yourself that's become a bit of an Eddie Murphy thing. And for me, there's a kind of sadness in that as well.
Yeah.
That you're trying to recapture that magic. Whereas to be honest, you can't, right? Those were historically specific moments.
I think with that film though, the big thing at the time was the Legacy movie, the
Yeah, yeah,
Legacy
yeah.
sequel. So Top Gun, Maverick was
Well,
huge.
Mavericks changed
Stallone came
everything.
back with Creed.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so all these guys, and so the only franchise he really had was Beverly Hills. And I think
yeah,
the third one, he left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths
yeah.
and he
Because I
wanted
think
to
it
do
was such a
something.
poor film. Yeah,
And what bummed me, like when I was watching it, I was like, this is the type of movie they should have in the cinema because there's a
yep,
number of films that have come out streaming that I thought would be really great cinema movies, not in the context of like necessarily of an art form, but more like a communal
yeah,
experience of entertainment where
yeah, for
people could
sure.
watch stuff
Well, I'm
and laugh at
surprised
it
they didn't.
together, you know?
I'm surprised they didn't negotiate a cinema release for Axel F because the
Yeah.
buzz. I mean, Netflix must have put a fortune into the marketing because I
Mm.
remember the buzz around that on Netflix was huge for like 6 months.
Yes.
So it surprised me they didn't negotiate a deal with a production company. Like with say Frankenstein at the moment, we'll give it a two
Mm.
theater run and then we'll put it straight to Netflix.
Exactly right. I just want to end this just talking about our favorite Eddie Murphy performances and
Oh
films.
yeah,
I was saying to you in the rundown, I like to just do a little bit of a top five kind of look at stuff.
yes.
I'll hit you with my five, and
Okay,
then you
go.
tell me what you think of yours. Okay, so number five, I love this film, Life, the one he did with
Oh
Martin
yeah, yeah.
Lawrence, where like he
Yes,
plays like
that's a good
the
one.
guy in
Yeah, I really
prison,
like that.
the
Yeah.
chain gang. I thought that movie was fantastic. And again, it's got some of my favorite lines. The whole thing about the cornbread. Like, I know
Yes.
he can't eat my cornbread. He can get his own cornbread. And then, yeah,
Yes.
I love that one. Another one is another underrated one. Bowfinger, the movie he did with Steve
My God,
Martin.
I forgot Bowfinger's going to feature in my top five. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I actually think Bowfinger's a masterpiece.
I think so too because Steve Martin wrote it, Frank Oz
Yes.
directs it, and Eddie Murphy plays two roles in it. He plays the Kit Ramsey character, who's like this paranoid movie star, who's I think he's in some type of like a form of Scientology, which a lot
They
of
call
people kind of
Mindhead.
speculate. They
Okay.
kind of, yeah, that's right, yeah. Which a lot of people speculated was a reason why the movie got kind of like shut out in a
Because
lot of
it
cinemas
again
and
didn't
such.
do very well and no one cared. Whereas
Yeah,
that film's now a cult film, right? And now,
yeah,
especially for people who if you love movies, watch both, especially if you're into like classic B grade cinema.
yeah,
Both is a kind of riff on a guy called Ed Wood, who was this
yes.
kind of silly, what silly? No, Ed Wood thought he was Orson Welles, but it's absolutely wonderful.
Yes, I think the movie they were trying to make in the movie was Chubby Rain. So
Have
whenever
you
it rains really
have you
hard,
right?
I say to my wife, go, hey, we've got some chubby rain today,
Have
which is
Matt, that's the amount of times I've said that to people. Oh, it looks like chubby rain outside
yeah,
today.
exactly.
So, I mean, because Bowfinger was such a big thing for me. Yeah.
I love Bowfinger. It's a great. Number three, Dolomite is my name.
Yeah.
We talked about that already. Then we have Beverly Hills Cop, and then for me, Coming to America, I think is he's
Yeah.
kind of like the top for me because that's the first time he does kind of like the multiple role things in the film. Rick
Yes.
Baker's kind of like the makeup, but also just like when he does kind of like the role of Prince Akeem, the main
Yes.
character in it. That's almost as straight as a role that he's had. He's playing
Exactly.
in the same movie, he's playing the straight man and the comedic relief at the same time.
And sometimes in the same scene.
Yeah.
So when he's playing, um, when he is the prince and they arrive in Queens, for example, he will sometimes go between straight and crazy. So
That's
he'll be
right.
really straight with, I'm looking for, I don't want a model. I want to find a woman who is interested in me for, who I am or what I am. But at the same time, he'll just like scream out, F you, New York, so in the same moment, he's flipping between absurdity and playing it straight. And I think that's pretty incredible to play that Tony and timing to get that right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my five. Do you have a five yourself?
All right, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna say the things that I absolutely love. I'm not. These are not necessarily my five favorite Eddie Murphy movies, but the performances of Eddie in it.
Yes,
Right.
I'm pretty much the
Okay.
same. Yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna go five. I want the ensemble from Nutty Professor.
Right.
Just think. So this is him playing. This is the family. So it's when when we get those tracks around the room, and we cut, and it's Eddie, 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 and it's just
Hmm.
astonishing. I'm gonna say Donkey at four
Oh
because
yeah,
I just
Donkey.
think
Yeah.
he owns that movie. I'm gonna go Reggie from 48 Hours at
Yeah.
three because I really think that is the Eddie Murphy movie star appearing for the first time, and then you're gonna have an entire franchise around him. Um, at two, I'm gonna Axel Foley because I think you can't leave Axel Foley out. But number
Right.
one, I'm gonna go Bowfinger. So I think Kit Ramsey and Kit's, which you discover is his brother. Kit, what is Kit's Kit Ramsey's brother? I keep forgetting.
I'm just looking now. The name is okay, Jiff.
Jiff.
So Jiffredson,
How could
Jiff
I forget
Ramsey.
Jiff? God, I
Yes,
love
and
Jiff so much.
don't forget he's been in the movie industry because he works at Blockbuster.
So just to say to people who have not seen Bowfinger, Kit, the main Eddie Murphy role, is the biggest star in the world. He's like Eddie Murphy in the 80s,
Right.
and he constantly feels everyone's surveilling him, including he reads a script and he counts up how many K's there are in it, and he says
Yeah.
to the agent, "So what do you know about that? That's divisible by three. That's KKK.
KKK.
K
Yeah.
appears 62 times in the script." Stuff like that. That's so brilliant, right? And then he also plays Jiff, who's the scene where Jiff tries to cross the freeway.
And he's
And,
saying,
and,
and Steve Martin's like, they're all stunt guys. You don't have to worry about me.
Exactly. And of course, for people listening, not seeing the movie, they're not stunt guys. It's just I think it's the 105 in Los Angeles, and it's like
Mm.
9 lanes. And then he does it, and he's crying because he's so afraid. He's got to the end, and then Steve Martin goes, "That was brilliant. Let's do another take." And so Bowfinger, I think, is the most underrated Eddie Murphy movie because it's so exceptionally good. And
Yeah.
I'm sad that a whole generation has missed this movie because it's a film lover's movie. If you love movies, this is what that movie does for you.
And I think in that movie as well, the other hilarious part is when he's Jeff, his reaction to seeing Heather Graham take his top
Like
off.
it's
He's just kind
awful.
of like he's just like he's like a it's like a 10-year-old child or
Yeah, and I
something. Just
think he gets that dopey smile and he's got
he's
braces
got the
on.
braces,
He says something like,
yeah.
"Awesome." That's his big line constantly when he sees Heather Graham.
Oh man,
God, yeah, so
it's a fantastic movie. So
yeah,
everyone out there, so November 12th, the documentary Being Eddie, Netflix. So he's going to look at his life and career. And Netflix actually do a pretty good job of doing these kind of like documentaries. I like the one they
yeah.
did on Sylvester Stallone. They did I think a couple
Yes,
of
I
years
saw
ago or
that.
last year.
The
They
Schwarzenegger
just
one
the
as well, which I thought was
Schwarzenegger
really
one was
fun.
pretty
Yeah.
cool. So they do a pretty good job of these. So I'm interested to see what they do with this one. And for everyone out there listening, Film versus Film podcast. That's Bruce's podcast. It's in the title. They
Yeah.
pit films together. They debate
Thank
it.
you so much.
I really recommend people check it out. You got to do one now for Bowfinger versus something,
We
or
should,
maybe.
you know that. We actually just recorded one before coming on here, and we did we're kind of in Trump era cinema at the moment, so we did Eddington versus One Battle After Another. So
Yeah, to
we had
2025 releases too. Yeah.
yeah, we decided to do a couple of like a very recent one because it's like movie season, people are going. So we thought, okay, also our followers are kind of really into movies, and so we
Mm.
figured they would have seen these films, and that was so much fun. God, we were laughing so much talking about
You
those two.
know, if you're going to do Bowfinger, I think a good one would be a Bowfinger against Tropic Thunder because they're about
Oh, that's
movies.
brilliant, Matt. That's actually because they're two very interesting, especially with Robert Downey Jr.
Junior, yeah.
He plays the kind of guy in blackface as a method.
Hmm.
I mean,
That's right.
even that is so funny.
He plays an Australian. Don't forget he
An
plays an
Australian
Australian. Yeah.
method actor in blackface. You
Yeah.
can't. I mean, try doing that now. Oh my
And
gosh.
once again, the person who did the makeup for Robert Downey Jr. in that movie was Rick Baker.
Is that right? Yeah, I never know that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Amazing. What a career that guy's had.
I know. Tell me
Yeah,
about it. And
very
what a
good.
career Eddie Murphy has had as well. And it's been a
Yes.
pleasure today to talk about it with you, Bruce. Thank you so very much for your time. And yeah, man, we'll talk again in the future, I'm sure.
Amazing. Thanks, Matt. Always fun talking.